You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, huge shout out to our sponsors. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. A huge shout out to Governor Anatoby for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. Adding to that is the Doghouse, and so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. We are in Oklahoma City today. I am at a very, very cool building. We're at Hearts for Hearing with Dr. Rene Gifford to talk about just all the incredible things that this building does. Most people have driven by this building. It's off Lake Hefner Parkway, just north of Lake Hefner. You've definitely driven by it. But do you know what goes on here? Probably not. I mean, that's what we're going to dive into today. But like we do on the podcast, before we dive into the topic, we're going to talk a little bit about our guest. So, Rene, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm excited to dive into your story. You have a very, very impressive, we call it CV, resume is the American word for your background. Really impressive.
Thank you.
Excited to dive in, and also excited to find out, because you're like me, you're not from here originally. So excited to dive into all those things. So yeah, let's do that. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Yeah, so Rene Gifford. I'm an audiologist and hearing scientist. I have spent the majority of my career in academia, so at universities, academic medical centers, doing research, seeing patients, teaching in the classroom, in the clinic, and most recently came here to Oklahoma City to be at Hearts for Hearing, where I'm serving as Chief of Audiology and Research. Not from Oklahoma. I had not really spent much more than maybe a couple days here over the course of my lifetime before moving. Just really loving our time here so far.
You haven't gone through a storm season yet, though, have you?
Not yet, no. Yes.
You've gone through our fall, spring, ice storm, fall, spring, all that stuff.
Absolutely. It just makes it exciting.
It is very exciting. And those noon alarm clocks that just go off every Saturday are just tests. It's okay. Because that's what freaked me out when I first moved here. So, grew up and thinking that you wanted to be in audiology from day one? Like, how do you dive into that? Or were you just kind of like a science kid growing up and think, you know what, this pops up and I'm going to take it?
Yeah, great question. No, I didn't even know what an audiologist was until I was maybe a junior in high school. And so I was raised by my grandparents, and I was an only child. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, and he was in the 82nd Airborne Division, a paratrooper, and he was parachuting over the Battle of Sicily, and he was shot. And what happened is he had shrapnel that really kind of hit the side of his head. And what happened was he was given a Purple Heart, got some time, but he was able to recover entirely from a physical standpoint, but he had pretty severe hearing loss for the majority of his life from that point forward. Of course, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, hearing aid technology was nowhere where it is today. I mean, even, a decade ago, things have changed dramatically. And so I just kind of had my entire life knowing that, hearing loss significantly impacts our ability to communicate with others. And, communication, it's a fundamental human right. It's essential to everything we do with other people. And so it's kind of shocking to think that I didn't think about being, in that hearing healthcare industry, but it just didn't occur to me until I was introduced to this profession, and there was just no going back from that point.
What time in your life were you introduced to this profession?
Yeah, in high school, I learned about audiologists.
Okay.
But even then, I went into college as a pre-med. So thinking that I wanted to work in, maybe pediatrics, doing some research, seeing patients. And then it became very clear I loved research.
Yeah.
Like clinic as well, but I had lots of questions why.
Yeah.
They would say, this is what happens, but why? And so one of my professors pulled me aside and said, you got to go get a PhD. So basically from that point, that's where I went from there. And it's so funny because only about 10 years ago did it really occur to me that this is my entire life coming up to this point. I was supposed to be here all the time, right? I mean, I grew up with someone who had severe to profound hearing loss and who didn't have hearing technology to help them. And so here I am. So I absolutely love what I do. I just can't imagine doing anything else.
What leads you at a young age to think you want to dive into the profession of just in the medical field then, before you find that audiology is a thing?
Yes, so I am a bit of a science nerd. So even when I was 5 years old, I would read science encyclopedias. So that tells you how old I am. We didn't have the internet. So I just would I would just want to read about diseases and pathophysiology. And I loved anatomy and physiology. And so once you get to college and you start taking all of the biochem and the organic chem, it takes you a little bit away from that, And so I thought, I know that that's fundamental and absolutely critical. But then I start taking things like anatomy and physiology and then, neuroscience. Yeah. And then from there, it's just, you can't go back. It's just fascinating.
That's really cool. What would, if you were to have the opportunity to ask your grandparents today, what was I like as a child? What do you think they'd say?
I think they'd say I had my face in a book all the time. I was always getting in trouble for reading in bed. So I would turn the light out, but I'd have a flashlight underneath the covers. Millions of questions. I must have been a really, annoying little child. But I think, I was a pretty good kid, good student. But I couldn't get enough of books. Yeah. And I still kind of feel that way today.
I had a friend on the podcast last year who was also raised by his grandparents. And I never understood it. And that kind of, it makes total sense. But, you're raised in a way, like the parent, quote, generation that isn't raising you, you're raised by grandparents who are 40, 50, how much older they are, right? Yeah. So you're kind of getting raised back in the day.
Exactly,
which
right.
in today's world and especially then it's kind of like a blessing to look at it, right? Like the way that, like my parents were raised, you get to learn that way too. And it was just an interesting way to look at life. And he's like, he called him his pop, my dad, it was very old school, but I have all these amazing, kind of stories and amazing ways and that I was raised that people generation that are similar to his didn't grow up that way, so it's fortunate to have that.
Yeah, so I'm technically Generation X or Gen X, but I was raised sort of like a baby boomer by the greatest generation. So, being able to sort of speak to large generations, I think if anything, I was had a leg up on that. But it's a really unique position to be in, especially as a young person, because you can talk to older people probably better than most others,
right.
But maybe not to your peers. And so,
what was your grandmother like? You said your granddad was in World War II and a vet and got a Purple Heart. What was your grandmother's story? Yeah,
my grandmother was, so she worked at the Naval Yard in Philadelphia, and that's where she met my grandfather. Okay. She was just a worker. She was just roll up her sleeves, whatever it took to get her, get her kids through school. She also raised some of her nieces and nephews. She's just one of those people who was open door, and then her granddaughter came in, and so they were just loving people, and I feel really lucky that I had them in my life.
Did you think after college that you'd move back home, or were you kind of sight set on the world, I want to go explore and get away and travel?
Great question. So my upbringing was a little bit unique. So the first 12 years of my life, I was raised in just outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And then my grandfather retired and they moved to Arizona, as many do. And so then they took me in middle school to Arizona. And so then I spent my teen years there. I just knew I wanted to go see different areas. I love Arizona to visit. It wasn't my cup of tea for the long term. I need seasons in my life. Otherwise, everything is just what day is it? What month is it? And so I just love to see different parts of the world and the country. This is the 5th state I've lived in. Although, honestly, I don't know that we'll move. We really like it. And we've actually now have our youngest son get ready to move here. So that's pretty exciting.
Awesome. How many kids do you have?
I have three children, all grown, 3 boys.
Any in the field that following you?
Oh, good question. No, my oldest has a PhD in biochemistry. He's doing a postdoctoral fellowship at the University of Colorado. So I guess somewhat in my shoes, but he was smart to go into something, more, basic science.
So college is where you dive into, high school is kind of figure out audiology, you dive into it in college, your professor comes to you and says, I think you should get your PhD, so you end up staying. Talk to me about that time in your life. Where are you? What do you think is happening? Where do you think you're going to go in the world? Like, where is Dr. Rene at that point in her career, in her life?
Yeah, so I was being raised by grandparents, I was very much, I did what I was told to do. And so when my professor said, you would be perfect for a PhD, you really have to consider it, of course, I immediately took that to heart. But I was also told, you will be so much more marketable and you're going to have a better understanding of research if you first get a clinical degree and work with patients. So they recommended I go get a master's degree and then complete a clinical fellowship in audiology, which I did, again, followed those instructions. So I went to Nashville, got my degree at Vanderbilt University, and then stayed there for a year for a clinical fellowship. Then we went back to Arizona. I married an Arizona boy, had started our family there, and finished my PhD and then my postdoctoral fellowship there.
Okay. What was the highlights of your PhD and your fellowship?
Ooh, so my PhD, interestingly, was in just kind of basic psychophysics. And so psychophysics is sort of like the psychology of hearing, in which way you're using behavior to look at neuroscience, right? So a different physiology. And so I worked with people with normal hearing. I couldn't have been in a more different position. And during that time, it was a 5.5-year program, I kept asking, okay, but how would this apply to someone who had hearing loss? How would this apply to someone who, we can't use hearing aids for, or they don't qualify for an auditory implant? And my advisor, my mentor, was very much basic science and was like, no, that's clinical. We need to stay in our lane. So then I did my postdoctoral fellowship in a more clinical research lab, looking really at cochlear implants across the lifespan. So kind of getting back to my roots and working more with children and individuals really all around the world and all ages who have various degrees of hearing loss.
Yeah. My grandparents, on my dad's side, my nan, we on my dad's side have little ears, and so she hated, but her hearing aid fit. It fit perfectly. Mm-hmm. She just didn't like wearing it.
Sure.
But it's always funny, we have little ears. I do too, so I never wear those earbuds. Like, I can wear normal earbuds, but like the pod little things, they don't fit well. They don't fit well in my ears at all. Neither to putting like ear protection in for going shooting and stuff like that. I have always and I think I ruined my hearing probably when I was in high school, like listening to loud music with headphones, thinking I was cool and just blasting my eardrums with stupid music.
I think we all have that story.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So I've never done the test, but I wouldn't be surprised if somebody was like, yeah, you're kind of definitely on the list of some form of, you don't have perfect hearing for sure.
Well, I know where you could go to get your hearing tested. Right. So if you have a question,
in the building, it's great. Back to your studying, back to you diving into all of that. Being in a book all the time, you clearly have a skill and a passion for research and figuring stuff out. What is for you, and you can completely nerd out on this stuff because I find it fascinating, and people listening will definitely find it fascinating, for the things that you have done in your research and your career, what are the Super Bowl moments for you as an audiologist, the things that you've done that the general public in the world listening or watching wouldn't have any idea, but for you, you're this is the peak to where I got to, this is what I do, and this is what I just nerded out completely on because this is my passion. Yeah. What are those things for you?
Oh boy, there's a lot. But I would say for me, the pinnacle, which was I was almost stage fright. So I got to be on Science Friday with Ira Flato for NPR. And it was fascinating, and it was scary, and it was definitely a pinnacle moment. And as part of that, they did this series of women in science, and so they highlighted me and my work in my lab for about 20 minutes of that documentary, and then going to see the documentary in a movie theater, and there was a group of young Girl Scouts there, and they wanted to talk to women in science, and that was probably one of the most fulfilling things of my career, because getting to talk to these young girls and letting them know that you can do anything you want. And if you want to be a scientist, look, I can do it, you can do it. And so that was a pretty exciting day for me. And even though I might not have been doing, audiology or hearing science, I hope I was inspiring some of those young girls.
Is there quite a difference in male and female in science then, those careers?
It depends on the field. Yeah. Okay. So in our field, interestingly, on the clinical side, it's about 87% female. Okay. And then when you go onto the more science side, it's closer to a 50-50 male-female. Okay. So there is a little bit of a skewing there gender-wise. Yeah.
It must be cool to see, like I said, little Girl Scouts coming up to you that have been doing STEM programs and learning. And we have an amazing Girl Scout facility in Oklahoma City. They're learning all these things, and then they're seeing it, and then they can look up to someone like yourself because you were that person in their shoes at some point. Right?
Absolutely, and I was also a Girl Scout, which I got to tell them too. And because when I was younger, it really didn't even necessarily occur to me that I could be a scientist. I'm from a different generation. I'm in my 50s, and the people on TV who were the scientists wearing the lab coats, it was almost all men. Mm-hmm. And so it didn't really even, I just thought, I'll go to school, I'll become a doctor, and I'll see children. Well, I guess I am a doctor with a PhD, and I do see children, but I'm doing it in a different capacity.
It's awesome. I think my mum's a nurse, my dad isn't kind of an engineer. My mum's on like a nurse. My brother's in the police force back home, and so like they're service-based family, and it's just cool to. My granddad was a police officer, and it's just cool to speak with people who add value constantly in the medical type field, or I don't know what the right word for it is, but just in the service-based field, because. And you get to work with kids and see the impact. And behind us, we've got pictures on the walls, and then people have all seen the reels or videos of a kid hearing for the first time or hearing their mother's voice.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's the cutest thing in the world, right? But this happens daily in this building, right? And people probably don't realize how amazing this building is for Oklahoma and also the nation too, right? Most people think, oh, it's just a building in Oklahoma City. Well, people travel a long way to come here, and there's clearly a reason that this place pulled you out of academia when you get to the top, and you've been working in a career for so long. I think like this is my North Star. Yeah. So we will get to why you end up coming here, but I do want to dive into you're at Vanderbilt, you're in Nashville, things are going well, you have a family, everything's great. Did you ever think that you'd step out? Like what's like the first domino that kind of falls for you to end up in Oklahoma City? Yeah,
it's a great question. So for an academic, you sort of have these milestones, right? So you want to first get tenure. So you go from assistant to associate with tenure. So that's a permanent position with the institution. And then you go from associate to full professor. And then you want to get an endowed chair, so that's where a donor provides anywhere from $1 million to $5 million to provide you with a named professorship. And then you get an amount of those funds each year to help support your research. So I basically did all of those things. I check. And I was finding myself, I loved what I did, and I loved everybody I worked with, and I loved Nashville. But I just kept feeling something was missing. I feel like every year I was getting pulled further and further from the actual mission of what we do and why we do it. And so about 2 years ago, I just started saying, maybe this isn't where I do for the rest of my life, and I would tell people, and they'd go, are you crazy? You're going to walk away from a tenured position with an endowed chair? And I'm like, I'm not crazy. I think that I'm being called to do this. And then this position just opened up. They reached out to me. Would you be interested? I'm like, absolutely. Yeah. So made the trek out to Oklahoma and fell in love with it. I obviously I knew about Hearts for Hearing. It's really has a global center. It has a global reputation. We get people from really not only the U.S., but we get people coming from all over. And it's just a joy to be here. This is a very happy place, and really great things happen here.
How'd your family take it when you thought, hey, by the way, we're picking up and headed to Oklahoma?
Yeah, so my husband was very supportive of it. So I've been with my husband since I was 15. He was 17. We met in high school. We have three boys. At the time, our three boys, they're still all basically in college or in their training at some level, 2 undergrad, 1 in a postdoc. And when we first said, we're thinking about leaving and moving to Oklahoma, they're like, why? We have this life here. We've been here for so long. And I'll be honest, especially my youngest, he did not like that idea. He really wanted to stay there. And it's funny because he, of all of them, is moving here in next month, I believe, and he absolutely fell in love with Oklahoma. So it was actually something that was meant to be.
Yeah. How was that first trip here? What did they kind of take you to experience? How did they sell you on moving to Oklahoma City?
Yeah, so it didn't take much, so I'll be honest with you. So one of my NIH grants about 10 years ago, I had Hearts for Hearing as a part of one of our study sites. And so I knew very well that this site was, very research intensive, rigorous experimentation. They had the patient population. They had really everything that one would need to do the work that I do. And in fact, so many of my students would come out and say, where should I go? I want to work with children and I want to work in best practices. And every single one of them would say, you need to go to Hearts for Hearing. And of all those people, I had one student who took me up and she came here and she never left. And that was, almost 10 years ago. And so I knew about this place, thought it was great. Oklahoma took a little bit more because I didn't know much about it, and I wanted to make sure, of course, are there seasons? I knew about the weather, of course. We had a lot of tornadoes in Tennessee too. So that I heard they're a little bit more intense here, but it really didn't take much to see this place, see the people that I'd be working with, see the vision and the mission, and I was just pretty much hooked from the minute. Basically, I remember thinking, Oklahoma, and by the time I got back to the airport, I was like, yeah, we're moving here. So it was that. That's awesome. And yeah, it was pretty instant.
Yeah. Did your husband come with you when you made the trip?
Not that first one. So, But we came back a few weeks later and he loved it because he's from Arizona originally. Yeah. All of his family is still there. So this is actually a little closer to him. So it was a nice compromise. Yeah.
So you come here to a facility you've known obviously a lot about, there's some quick stats for people listening. This facility, serves over 40,000 people in the state. We have obviously home base in Oklahoma City, a space in Norman, a space in Tulsa. It is the only facility of its kind in the state as well, and it was founded in 2003. So it's been around, for 20 plus years now. But for a place to have this much impact in your world and for you to already know about it, it makes total sense that this wasn't a hard decision.
Yeah,
coming down here.
Absolutely.
So your decision then, I guess, when you put yourself out there, you're like, do I want to? No, maybe I don't. I want looking for something new, and timing, fate, whatever you want to call it, pops up, and the position of Chief Audiology and Research opens up here, and you say yes. Mm-hmm. It hasn't been that long though. You've been here a few months.
That's right.
Tell me about those last few months and how things are going here and the things that you are excited about, what's happened, and what life is now like in Oklahoma City.
Yeah, so since we got here, of course, we bought a house. I started my job here. We are basically doubling the size of this building. So we've got about 30,000 square feet now. We are adding an additional 30,000 square feet. So if you're driving by, on Hefner Parkway, you'll see the big cranes, moving beams around. And so the exciting part of that is the existing space that we're in now on the first floor where we see our adult hearing aid patients, that is going to ultimately be our entire research institute space. And so I've been tasked with building that research institute, continuing to bring in NIH funds, industry funds, foundation funds, donations, whatever it takes. Basically, my goal is to ensure that no child, really, not only even in Oklahoma, but no child at all goes without the hearing technology and the hearing healthcare that they need. And that was completely within the mission of the founders of Hearts for Hearing, that all children birth to 3 years of age are going to get hearing healthcare, and they're going to get hearing aids, whatever they need, for free. And so finances will never be a barrier for them to be able to have the gift of sound. And so my goal is just to continue that throughout that lifespan, making the division lines between research and clinical practice, which really are pretty firm in a lot of places. Even in academic medical centers, you have kind of like your laboratory spaces, then you've got your clinical spaces, and they rarely interact with one another. I want this to be just one continuous line so that when we start to make discoveries in the lab that could impact and, make improvements for someone, we start applying those in the clinic, really the next day. So that's sort of the goal. And the team here has just completely, enabled me to do that. And it's just a dream come true.
Yeah. Can we nerd out a little bit on the inner workings and general, when someone comes in or when someone is born and they have hearing issues, you mentioned your grandfather, the technology obviously back then wasn't good now. Dive into, the technology now, the breakthroughs that are happening, and just kind of, if you could shed light on that for people listening, because I know nothing about it. And I know we have great technology, but I wouldn't know where to start trying to explain it. I just know that sometimes people have something behind their ear and it helps. So what's that like from your side, and the big breakthroughs that have happened, and also you talk about the lab here, the breakthroughs that are happening right here in Oklahoma City?
Yeah, so there have been lots of sort of changes in the field over time. And so one of the big changes, of course, was like microprocessors and then miniaturization, right? So that was happening in the late 70s, early 80s. But the technology was still not great. We were using analog technology, which is subject to distortion and difficult, separating noise from speech and other signals. With that then came digital technology, so better representation of the incoming signal. And then from there, more miniaturization, greater noise reduction. Now we have, application of artificial intelligence to, separate out the target signal. So if someone who's speaking over here versus someone who's speaking from here, 20 years ago, the hearing aid microphone wouldn't even know what to do with that information. It's just amplify everything. And so we really have seen sort of this really rapid, just exponential growth in the ability to serve individuals with hearing loss with hearing aids. What we've also seen is that in the early to mid 1980s were the clinical trials for auditory implants, specifically cochlear implants. And so we've now had cochlear implant technology available for children for over 30 years and for adults for 40 years. And so now we're seeing that, individuals like, for example, my grandfather, who would have never even really benefited from even standard hearing aids, are now benefiting from auditory implants. So it's improving their quality of life, their ability to communicate. It's extending one's career if that's what they want. And we now know, too, that when we have hearing loss that's untreated, we're at significant risk for cognitive decline as well. There's a number of studies that are continuing to show that over and over. So it's not even just hearing health. It's also brain and neural health as well. So important because, the hearing is one of those 5 senses, and we were intended to have all of those senses, and they work together. So there's these multisensory networks in the brain, and when you remove one or more of those, the brain has to continuously compensate. And so a lot of people might hear of this as neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity can happen in response to training. Medication can also happen in response to insult or damage. And so we really have opportunities to help from mild hearing loss all the way up to profound hearing loss. It's a great time to be in this field.
Yeah. And we talk about kind of times that we're born, right? Are we born in the right time? Yeah. There was somebody gave me the question the other day, is it the time or the person that makes, that era? Is it the athlete? It was generally based around athletes, thinking of I'm a golfer. So is Tiger Woods as good as he is because of the time he was born in, or because of how good he was? It is. And it's such an open-ended question. Yeah. But when you talk about, being in the field at this time when the technology is where it's at now, you get to do obviously a lot more because the technology is there.
Yes.
Right? And it's always going forward, and we're seeing amazing things with AI and all these things.
Absolutely.
Good and bad.
Yeah, good and bad, indeed.
I wouldn't like to be a professor right now with AI.
No kidding.
But, I can't help but see how excited you get about what you do.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It clearly... this isn't stuff that keeps you up at night worrying. This stuff keeps you up at night because you just don't want to put the book down or the research down, because you're this is it. This is passion for me. It's not a job.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, family and hearing is sort of like the things that are most important to me. It's what gets me up in the morning. It's what makes me, just excited to be here every single day. I think it's all about the time. I don't think it's the person, because for me, if I were born 100 years ago, I could have helped with audiology. It was just sort of evolving at that point, but I would have had such limited resources because there really wasn't anything from a rehabilitative standpoint. It was more just diagnosis. And so to be at this stage where we're seeing, digital technology, AI application, miniaturization, implantable technology, and now we're on the precipice of gene therapy and hearing therapeutics to reverse hearing loss. I mean, it's just this is like a dream come true, right? I mean, I just am like a kid at a buffet, give me a little bit of everything. And so I think, where we're going to be in 20 years, I don't even know that we can even foresee what that's going to look like.
So you mentioned the founders of this building was, their mission was mainly, up to 3-year-olds of not paying for any help, not paying for any hearing stuff. Tell me a little bit about the outside and everything else that happens outside of those, little babies, and what you mentioned up to people that are, older and come in for everything, and like you just mentioned, therapy to get your hearing back. Through without technology. What else happens here?
So for children, about anywhere between 1 and 3 children in 1,000 is born with congenital hearing loss. And so the incidence is pretty fixed in terms of what we see each year. Where we're seeing increases in hearing loss is in the aging of the global population, right? People are living longer. We have more noise exposure. We have more kind of like environmental toxins. We have medication today that we didn't have 50 years ago, some of which might be damaging to our ears. So there's this sort of, we're now seeing more and more sort of a shifting from the pediatric side of things to the greatest population that's growing in terms of our patients is really the adult population. As we mentioned earlier, with use of like live music and headphones, and how many kids do you see walking around? They have AirPods in all the time, and they're just cranked up. And so I really wish I could just talk to all of them, because I was in the boat too when I was that age. I went to concerts. My husband and I were front seat Metallica, 1989. My ears rang for 2 weeks.
So jealous.
It was fantastic.
Great concert.
Oh, it was great. And so, we're really, thankfully we have ability to treat that. But we still can't resolve, we can't restore hearing to what it was before. And so that is the problem. With glasses, we can put our glasses on, and for most people, depending on, the etiology or what's going on, we can correct to within normal limits. It's not going to necessarily be the case for all hearing, because it's a completely different system. And so, just having that ability to be here and see from infants, so we screen right now like 60% of the state births. And so that's another thing that's new too, like in the last 20, 25 years. Before that, we weren't even screening for hearing loss in infants. And so the average age of identification was like 3 to 4 years, like in the 1960s. And then it got down to like 2 years of age, and then it got down to 1 year. And now we're diagnosing by 1 month of age, which is phenomenal, because now we can intervene as early as possible. And that there's something as simple like that we didn't even think about, that it just wasn't even on our radar.
Yeah. You talk about noise exposure now, and I'm always on my phone. I usually always have my earbuds in as well. Yesterday, though, I walked across campus at OU yesterday and didn't have my headphones in. It's usually because I'm on a phone call. I didn't have any phone calls. And I was just kind of like, I didn't realize I didn't have my headphones in until probably 10 minutes into my walk. And you're right, I look around, and I hadn't been on it. I didn't go to OU, but I haven't been on a college campus in a long time. And, I graduated 10 plus years ago. I was used to walking around saying hello to everybody. And I walk around and I just kind of smile and say hello to the first student. And then like after the third one, I looked out like, no one cares.
They're not paying attention.
They're not paying attention at all. And when you talk about noise exposure, and people, kids always have their headphones in, or, we're cranking our TVs up, or whatever it is, it's so much more sensory now than obviously than it was, when we grew up, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah, I for good and bad, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm sure you guys obviously are busy, but there's people like myself who don't even realize we have a hearing issue.
Oh, absolutely.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, most people don't, so let's think about, your vision. You probably know your vision. Like, am I 20/20? Am I 20/30? What's your hearing number? Most people don't know, and there is a number associated with hearing, and we want to see a number of 20 or better. And so that's, the softest sound that one can hear. And so you would go up to someone and say, what's your prescription? They would know. What's your hearing? I've never had my hearing tested, and in fact, in the U.S., we're not even requiring even adults to have hearing screens. So, we get screened at birth, we get screened in school, and then we just go off and, never to be seen again, essentially. And so we know that only 20% of adults who could benefit from hearing technology are actually using it, and that's hearing aids. If you look at cochlear implants, less than 5% of adults who could benefit from that technology are using it. Yeah, so we have a problem on the adult side with the utilization of just even hearing healthcare in general. On the pediatric side, there's a lot of confusion as well in terms of like who qualifies for, hearing aids versus implants versus there's bone conduction. So you've probably seen like these headphones where it goes behind the ear and it's just stimulating directly into the inner ear. We can provide hearing aids that do that as well. So a child born, say, without an external ear or an external ear that might be malformed, we can provide that as well. I mean, these things didn't exist, and so we just have really a whole vast array of things that we can use to really provide and restore hearing to individuals across the lifespan.
It's of absolutely no surprise to me that you're building another 30,000 square foot building, because there's so much things for you guys to do, and there will always be things for you, always be more that can be done. Unfortunately, that's just the world that we live in. But, for this place to be the only one in Oklahoma, and, to consistently have the need, consistently be, changing things on a global scale. You guys are busy all the time, but this is what you love to do. And so that's, it's not like you're going to work and digging ditches every day, right? And there's nothing against people that do that, because some people like to do that. But it's, there's serious impact that is happening here. And even I walked in the door early, and the guy who greeted me sat behind a desk with the happiest, like, what's that? I'm like, I did not expect that at all.
Yeah.
First time I walked in the building, and most people are coming in with their kids, right? And so, I would expect that response, if I was walking in with a little child.
Right.
I didn't expect a response with me with my Pelican case and a camera, to do a podcast.
Exactly, yeah.
But that's the level and the care that you guys have, from someone at the front desk to you doing your job.
Absolutely. I mean, really everybody here understands this mission, and we're proud to be here. We're proud that the work that we do, it's, what could go wrong with, celebrating sound, right? Getting individuals the gift of sound, the restoration of their hearing, so that a grandparent can hear their grandchild, or a child can hear their mother's voice. Of course we're happy, right? It's a great place to be.
What's the kind of ratio to the kids coming in to the adults coming in?
Yeah, here we see way more children than we do adults, but that's likely due to the fact that this Hearts for Hearing, again, was started as more of a pediatric, foundation. But we know that the incidence of hearing loss is so much greater in adulthood. And so we have been increasing the size of our adult program over the years. And in fact, on the new building, a large proportion of that is going to be for our adult population. In 2020, it was the first year from a global standpoint that there were more individuals over the age of 60 than under the age of 5. And that's going to keep on going because birth rates have decreased, globally.
Yeah.
And mostly due to infant mortality, right, is improving. And so people are having fewer children. And then people are living longer. And with that, of course, is coming. We lose our hearing every year anyways. That's the reality of it. Even if you protected your hearing at the age of 40 is not what it was when you were 4. I'm hoping that might not be the case in the future when we have, therapeutic options. But there are a number of things that we can be doing to bring hearing more to the forefront. We don't even think about it. You go to get your driver's license, they check your vision. No one asks about your hearing. And hearing is a really big part of driving, right? And from a safety standpoint. Yeah. And so again, my job and my goal is really to bring hearing to the forefront and make it something that people are thinking about and are, prioritizing in their life, because it's such a huge part of what we do.
And to that point as well, if there's someone listening that's an adult, they've got kids, they're busy, they, for the most part, they can hear. They don't really think that it's a big issue, so they put it off. They kick the can down the road, and maybe they're a little bit of ways from Oklahoma City or Tulsa or Norman. Is there any opportunities for them to get, your help or have the facility come to them? Is there anything you guys do rurally in Oklahoma?
Great question. So we do have a mobile clinic, and so we basically anything we can do here, we can do on that mobile clinic. It's
really,
oh yeah, it's fantastic. We've got one of the best generators. It's silent, so even in the heat of Oklahoma summer, which I've heard can be pretty oppressive, we can do everything we do here on the run. The other thing I would encourage your listeners to do is on their smartphones, there are apps that are pretty good about, they have pretty good sensitivity as far as testing one's hearing. And I think that's a first step. And you can do that in the comfort and privacy of your home. Get an idea of where are you? Are you within the range of, what we would consider normal hearing for your age? What's your hearing number? And you can start to, kind of having that kind of discussion with yourself early on. And then sort of ease your way into it. I know no one really wants necessarily to get hearing technology. I can speak from experience. So I am an adult who had hearing loss later in life, probably because of all the Metallica concerts I was going to, but there might be a genetic component there as well. I've been wearing hearing aids for about 3 years. And I will tell you, and my husband will attest to this, I did not wear them consistently for the first year. And he would say, I'm going to tell your patients, you don't wear your hearing aids. And there's some adjustment period. And now that I'm used to them and I just know how much better I'm doing, if I go to a conference or if I'm just even like listening to a podcast, whatever it is, I just don't have to listen as intently. So the fatigue that I would have, like leaning forward really, intently, it's just gone. And so that alone, it just improves your ability to, function every day, and less effort, less cognitive load, all of the above.
Yeah. Yeah. I need to get mine checked. Do you know any apps you recommend?
Yeah, so there is one that is, it's called Mimi, M-I-M-I, and I'm most familiar with that one because there are a number of actual, prospective studies that have looked at that and looked at the kind of the reliability of that test compared to what we would do here in, the sound booth. Apple also has a few options, as do the Android, and I know, in the Apple, because that's what I have, in the health section, once you do a hearing test, it will tell you your hearing number, and so now you'll have your benchmark or your baseline where you are, and so that you can then monitor that going forward.
Yeah. The other thing that comes to mind as well is not, people who naturally lose their, and I'm talking about adults, so people who naturally lose their hearing over time, but then there's people who, it's pool season, right? It's lake season. They get water in their ear, and without knowing it, something happens. And they're like, I can't hear anything. Well, it's probably because it's clogged, right?
Yep.
Do you get cases like that too?
We do. So water, we get people who you might have a little bit of wax, and then over time, you take a shower, it warms up, it completely occludes. And then they think, I've lost my hearing, And so thankfully, often when someone has sort of a sudden, notice that it's lost, it's not always permanent. Okay. Often it could be. And so that's one of the things I would urge listeners is that if you or anyone you know happens to have a sudden onset of hearing loss, get to urgent care as soon as possible, because there is a very short window that they can use treatment. So they can provide steroid treatment, they can use antivirals, they can sort of give you this whole cocktail that's going to significantly increase your chances of having that recovery. What often happens is someone will go, oh, it's probably, maybe I have allergies or I'm getting a cold. They wait a couple weeks and then they've lost that time. So that's one of those kind of urgent hearing. There aren't many hearing emergencies, but that is absolutely one of them. But thankfully, most of the time, that's not it. Most time when I've heard someone say, my hearing's gone, I've lost it, it's, their battery died in their hearing aid, or, the wax has completely occluded the ear canal. So,
is there, this might sound like a dumb question because I don't know much about this field other than what we've learned today, but I had my teeth cleaned yesterday, and most people get their teeth cleaned every 6 months or whenever they go in. Do people ever schedule them to get their ears cleaned?
Oh, yeah, they do, actually. That's something that, in fact, I did. I used to do these doctor radios when I was at Mayo Clinic years ago, and I've done doctor radio on Sirius. One of the most prevalent questions is about earwax and when I should get my ears cleaned, how I should get them cleaned. Of course, we shouldn't use Q-tips. I always say that. And I do recommend that if you want to have your ears clean, your ear, nose, and throat, the ear, nose, and throat physician or your audiologist can do that for you.
Is it quite an easy process? Or
it's pretty easy.
I hate the dentist, and most people do, I think.
So we're not going to be, thankfully, we're not drilling anything in your ear. So that we're automatically better than the dentist. And so obviously dentists are very important.
Yeah, I love my dentist, but it's
not the most pleasant thing.
It's the audio why I don't like going to the dentist.
That's exactly right.
Because of the things you hear, and you hear that drill, and you hear the cleaning.
Or that grinding.
It's awful.
100%.
But yeah, like for I didn't know if that's and why people don't do that enough. And one thing, why shouldn't we use Q-tips as well? Yeah, so the main issue is the concern of actually going through the eardrum, and so you're kind of creating that perforation. It would be you would feel it before you get, but I've seen people where they're cleaning, they might have been startled or something happened, and they just happen to go through and they create a large perforation, and those they usually heal on their own, but not always. Yeah. And then you have additional surgeries, and then you have scarring, and there's a whole host of things that could go wrong. A lot of people still use Q-tips. I don't think it's the best thing to do. Go see your ear, nose, and throat doctor, or go see an audiologist. They'll be able to take care of that for you. I don't have one yet.
I will have one by the time I walk out of this
building. Let's finish up a little bit talking about, I want to dive into this new facility that's coming, this new 30,000, almost 31,000 square feet. How is that, in Oklahoma, and you guys are a nonprofit, right?
That's right.
I assume a lot of this money has to be raised, and it isn't cheap.
That's exactly right.
And so how is the process of raising the money? Originally this was founded 20 years ago for the babies, and you're talking about now this is going to be an adult wing to this new facility, and there's obviously a need for it, but money's got to come from somewhere.
It does.
So how has that process been? Has that process been supported by Oklahoma, or was it like a global support to get this facility built? What's that?
Yeah, so we are truly a non-for-profit. I know there are some individuals or some institutions with non-for-profit status, but they're not necessarily that. We really do depend 100% on state, federal funds, foundation grants, and donations. And none of this happens without that. And so we really, it's something that we're constantly pounding the pavement, and because we can't offer, free technology to children, we can't offer all of the services that we do without that support. And so, we're trying to provide a little bit more ongoing support, which is actually why we initially started the adult program, sort of bringing those individuals in to help bring in some funds to support the children. But now, we've grown so fast. So now we really are, we're trying to get beyond those state budgets and, the foundations. But, if you happen to have any listeners who really, this is their passion, we'd love to talk to you because there's some phenomenal research. There's phenomenal clinical programs here. Whether it be children, teens, adults, whatever it is, we have it here.
Yeah. Talking a little, I wanted to go back and talk about your love for Metallica and your music. Let's finish up with some fun stuff about that, because I love live music. I went to 10 shows last year. I've got 2 coming up in May. I think when you get a little older and you have a little bit disposable income, you just want to go and experience things live. Yeah. And I think especially now when everyone's diving into their phone, and I'm the worst at it. I look at my phone far too much. And you see these concerts, and you see what's it actually like to be in that crowd? It's amazing. People go and see your favorite artist live. You'll remember it for the rest of your life and make a trip out of it. What about yourself? You mentioned Metallica. What other great bands have you seen live that's going to make me jealous?
Yeah, so I would say one of the best concerts I've ever been to was Paul McCartney a few years ago. It was literally a life-changing moment for me. It was like one of those things I'll measure everything before and after that event. He came out, he sang for 3.5 hours at the age of 79. It was, and I'm a huge Beatles fan. It was just incredible. I've seen Blink 182, My Chemical Romance. I go to so many festivals. My husband and my sister-in-law and all, we went to this music festival in Las Vegas in the fall where it was all the bands of the late 90s, early 2000s, when we were young. And so honestly, I've probably been to so many that I can't even remember. I've been to probably dozens of concerts, and I'm like you, I'll go to as many as I can because it is such a special experience.
Yeah.
I agree. Like, if for those of you who, if your artist is coming to town, go see him.
What is it about and this is, I've never asked someone in your, that's in your profession about going and seeing live music and listening to music from your perspective, from having your fan side of it, but also having the total science understanding of sound waves and music and
Yes.
audio. Do you just have like a killer setup at home with a headset that you just sit in the corner and listen to your own music? Like, what is your like place of zen and peace with the best audio?
Yeah, now I'm kind of embarrassed because I don't have that.
That's coming.
I mean, really, I just use like a Bluetooth speaker and, go from Spotify or YouTube. But what I would say is I'd like to urge everyone to use hearing protection when they go to their concerts. So we do have the ability to get these like musician types of plugs, so they filter the sound and protect our hearing, but it doesn't obstruct the sound and the quality of the experience. So important. I did not have those when I was younger. I have them in my concert bag, the clear purse that we all bring to the concert. They're just literally always in there so that I have them. And now I have my oldest son. He's always going to concerts too, and he has a pair as well. So, you can enjoy live music and you can protect your ears at the same time.
And you can get those here?
You can.
Okay.
You can. You can get them really anywhere online. And they're not too expensive. I mean, we're talking, less than $100.
Yeah. To save your ears is worth it.
Exactly.
All right, last question, because I always like closing with this one because this is my profession. I'm in the real estate space, and so I'd love to ask my guests, if you were to build your dream house today, what does your dream house look like?
Wow. I'll be honest with you. The house that we bought here is pretty close to it, which I did not realize it at the time. So the people who built this house, they thought of everything, like in terms of, you turn around from the oven and there's all this storage for your pots and pans. And I never had any of this before I got here. And I thought, this is phenomenal. I didn't have this when my children were growing up, which would have been great. For me, not too big. I see these enormous houses getting built. I don't want to have to keep those clean. I like a nice, kind of compact cottagey sort of feel to it. I like land, so a little bit of space to roam, and just something that feels cozy. I just, it doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be the nicest and the newest. I just want it to feel welcoming and just feel at home. And really, that can be anywhere.
Do you have clients putting in sound rooms? Would you put in a sound room in your house?
I probably would not, but when I was in Nashville, I had several musicians that would come in and they had entire music studios in their house. Like recording studios. And so that's a little probably overkill for me, but I could probably do a better job of having better stereo system in my house. In fact, now I have to go home and think about that. Yeah, so thanks for bringing that. My husband's going to thank you for that.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry to your husband, because now you're going to be all night like, hey, we need a sound room, and this is what we need, a sensory space, and I need a better hi-fi system if I'm going to listen to my music.
Although we do have a movie room in this house, so yeah.
That's about to be renovated.
Probably. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Okay, awesome. Well, Dr. Rene, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate listening to you and your passion. It clearly comes across. And you're, for someone who spent their entire career climbing the, academic ladder to get to exactly where you wanted to be when you started in school, to leave, to just think, what? This isn't fulfilling me anymore. I need to go somewhere else. And then the timing of this position, and for you to come here from Nashville, it's special. And the story isn't over. This building's going to be built, and like you said, I think you're going to be here for a long time. So
I am.
I'm excited to catch up with you and hear how your son enjoys it here. If he's a golfer, let me know. Happy to help him with that.
We're all golfers.
And so, it's exciting to have you. And for people listening, where can they go? I just Google Hearts for Hearing and it'll show up. But is there anything specific that you would like to finish with, or give the listeners a little nugget to finish with? Yeah, so heartsforhearing.org is where you can find all of the services that we offer here, look at our team, and see really what our mission is. At the end of the day, I hope everyone knows that when they come here, anything that they spend is really going right back into that mission. We're going to make sure that nobody goes without the hearing that they have, and we don't want finances to get in the way. So come see us. If you have even a thought that maybe I have hearing loss, you're not sure, come on in. We'll take care of you, and we'll give you some information to take you through the rest of your life. So Awesome. People listening, I will put the link to the website in the description down below, and I'll also link the description to the Mimi hearing app if you want to go download that as well. Check it out, and we will catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too, but I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC, and hopefully our pups will run into each other.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.